Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Well, let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. It is Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. I'm Jon Jeune at the real Jon J_FF on Instagram and Twitter. And what a week it was in the NFL. We had so many upsets. So many people's survivor pools have been shot. We've had some high scoring fantasy football, production, from guys like James Cook and Alvin Kamara, Marvin Harrison Jr. We also unfortunately had some injuries, unfortunately that's part of the game. But seems like, we have, seems like we have to make some adjustments here in the, fantasy football landscape. It's part of the game. We've got to adjust. And so it just so happens that, I'm here week 3 fantasy football waiver wire show to help you guys figure out who are some of the best guys to add to your fantasy football rosters to help you, not just for week 3, but for the season the rest of the season as we go along. So, obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, live on YouTube or Twitch, again, going to figure out the X situation shortly. Promise you guys, give me about another week. And then Instagram live. Unfortunately, this isn't live right now on Instagram. It seems like there was a little bit of an issue with the stream, so going to put this on IG live a little bit later. It's probably as soon as this show ends live here, it'll go live on IG live, except it just won't be live. But obviously make sure you have the notifications on for when we drop a show, whether that is on IG live, when I go live at the real Jon J_FF. And then also, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening on podcast platforms, just make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. So that being said, let's jump into the waiver wire show. And as I said, there was a lot of injuries in week 3. The question is, how do we, sift through all those injuries, determine which ones are the long-term ones, which ones are the ones that, we have to, short term, that we got to make some minor adjustments to our rosters. Or maybe you didn't suffer an injury, but maybe, you didn't have a great draft. And, some of these injuries, open up opportunities for other guys that are on the waiver wire, which then opens up opportunities for you to go ahead and scoop those guys up so you can add them to your roster. So, and help, give yourself a boost. Because it's early, it's week 2. I know some people, they might think, hey, my team sucks. I'm 0-2, maybe I have the least amount of points in the league or whatever it is, right? It's never too late to get this thing righted. So, let's just jump into the waiver wire portion of this, and starting with the quarterback position as we usually do. And I'm going to give you one here that makes me a little uneasy, but I'm going to do it. As New Orleans quarterback, Derek Carr, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. We all know how this goes. I'm talking about Derek Carr now, so he naturally won't be productive this week. But in all seriousness, he's at home against the Eagles, who aren't a scary matchup for quarterbacks whatsoever. Jordan Love had a good day against them. We saw what Kirk Cousins was able to do, specifically on that last drive last night. So when I look at this matchup here, Derek Carr at home, potentially a high-scoring game here. So let's see if Derek Carr can come through for us. 3 weeks in a row now. And I'm just going to call him Dar now. So that's going to be a thing. But no, in all seriousness, Derek Carr available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. And I get why he's available in such a large percentage of leagues, is because we've seen this before. When you don't count on Derek Carr to do anything, that's when he has his best fantasy days. When you are like, hey, the matchup's great, Derek Carr is in a good spot here. Maybe I'd pick him as a stream of the week or a start of the week, or my former co-host Greg, when he would do that, it wouldn't work out for us, right? So I get the trepidation here with Derek Carr. And so that being said, I think this is a time. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Just not going to say it because I know how this goes. So if I say it, it's not going to go well. So I'm not going to say it. But you know what I'm trying to say. Moving on to the second quarterback, that's Sam Darnold, available in 86% of Yahoo leagues. He played well against San Francisco, and honestly, I'm not surprised that he's playing well through 2 games. If you know, you know. But now he gets a matchup against Houston where he might have to score some points here against CJ Stroud and that offense. So if Justin Jefferson sits, I feel less confident in this play here. But if Jefferson goes, I'm willing to stream Sam Darnold at quarterback this week. I like the offense. Kevin O'Connell's always been, a good offensive mind. They had to shuffle through a bunch of different quarterbacks last year and still managed to lead the league in passing yards. So I do like Sam Darnold this week and honestly rest of season. I was kind of saying before the season started, Sam Darnold, pretty good pick for comeback player of the year. Let's see how that plays out. Granted, it's only 2 weeks, but it's not looking half bad right now. Let's move on to the third and final quarterback I'm going to talk about today, and that is Justin Fields. Again, available in 80% of Yahoo leagues. There are already reports that Fields can hold on to this job if he keeps playing well. It keeps winning, especially, and that's something that I've talked about. The last 2 times I've talked about Justin Fields. Again, I keep saying this, but I think Russell Wilson gets his job back. Mainly because I believe that this offense could be more prolific in the passing game with Russell Wilson under center. While Justin Fields is doing some of the little things that helps win games, getting first downs with his legs, making some big throws when he needs to, there's still some little things that Justin Fields is not doing as well, throwing the football that Russell Wilson would be able to do. But at the end of the day, that doesn't, that probably doesn't matter to Mike Tomlin right now. He wants to win games, and that's all Mike Tomlin cares about. He always talks about keeping the main thing, and the main thing in that building is winning. So as long as Justin Fields is winning and the Pittsburgh Steelers are winning, I can see a world where Mike Tomlin just keeps rolling Justin Fields out there. So got to be prepared for that. And he should not be available in this large percentage of leagues because, again, his last two spots, they were not great, but the matchups weren't that great either, right? Denver and Atlanta, they're not particularly. I mean, Atlanta has a really good secondary, and that game plan, Arthur Smith will tell you as well, was generally pretty conservative. And then you've got the matchup against Denver. Denver has a strong pass defense as well. So again, those 2 matchups weren't great. He's got one coming up against the Chargers this week, which slightly better matchup for him, and one where he might have to score a few more points with Justin Herbert and that offense on the other side. I mean, that offense is not very prolific, but they're capable of moving the ball, scoring points. And the schedule down the stretch, looks somewhat promising for him in terms of, there's going to be some games on that schedule where he'll have to, they won't be able to play this ball control, slow paced offense, right? They'll have to score some points. They've got Indianapolis next week, or Indianapolis the week after, then they've got Dallas. He's got the Giants in week 8. He's got Washington week 10, Baltimore week 11. The Giants and Washington, those aren't matchups we'll have to score a lot of points, but those are defenses that I'm not really afraid of. And so Justin Fields being out there against those defenses, I skipped over the Jets in week 7, but they struggle to stop the run right now, especially on the edges. And so, that's a game where Justin Fields could make plays with his legs. They play Baltimore week 11. That's a game where he probably going to probably gonna have to score a decent amount of points there in that game, right? Cincinnati week 13. And now again, I know I'm looking far in the future here, but these are the kind of things that we got to think about at this point in the season, even, right? So, at a minimum, Justin Fields should be on your roster. Maybe not in your lineup, depending on who your quarterback is, but he should at least be on your roster. Moving on to the running back position, and that's where things got a little bit interesting. Kansas City running back Carson Steele, available 95% of Yahoo leagues. And why am I talking about Carson Steele, the undrafted free agent out of UCLA? Well, that's because Isaiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs has a fractured fibula and is expected to miss at least 6 weeks, potentially even more. But again, Carson Steele is going to have to step up and will have to fill in his absence. Andy Reid is kind of already answered. He was asked a question about Carson Steele stepping into that lead back role, and he said that he's going to have to step up, right? And so the expectation is that Carson Steele gets a bulk of the Pacheco role. I don't think he's going to replace Pacheco, but I do think he's going to do some of those Pacheco things. Run the ball on early downs. I mean, he also, they have not been afraid to use him in the pass game. But I think he's going to be able to do some of those things that Pacheco was able to do, like those tough runs, short yardage, goal line. So I do expect him to split some time with Samaje Perine. So Perine's probably not a bad pickup either as well. So, but Kansas City running back Carson Steele, probably the top ad at the position this week when you just consider the offense that he's in, the opportunities for touchdowns, and the role that he is set to inherit. Even if it's 70% of the Pacheco role, I think that's still, an RB2, mid to lower end RB2 production, which in this fantasy football landscape, given the running back situation, I think a lot of us would be happy to have that on our roster. So, and this is just a reminder, right? Like guys like this that are able to, that have this opportunity to kind of inherit this role because of potentially an injury, even if they can't be on your roster for the whole week, right? I'll share with you guys something. I was trying to pick up Carson Steele in one of my leagues. It was 4:24 p.m. and I was going and I was like, oh, who can I? Because I do this all the time, right? If I'm sitting there and I have a free roster spot, maybe a guy in the 1 o'clock game underperformed, and I'm like, oh, this guy's not gonna, no one's gonna pick him up. Let me drop him. I'm trying to pick him up I'm trying to pick, see who can I pick up, right? Like if an injury were to happen, who would be the guy that we spend a ton of fab on, burn the number one waiver priority on Tuesday or on Wednesday? Who is that guy? And can I just add him to my team right now for free? And I was trying to get Carson Steele on my team. Again, it was 4:24 p.m. and I went to click add, went to click drop, and the clock changed to 4:25, and there was an error in my transaction, and it didn't go through. And so, naturally, because of how things work out sometimes, Isaiah Pacheco ends up getting injured, and now I'm going to have to go spend some fab on Carson Steele. What would I be willing to spend in a $200 budget or $100 budget? I guess we'll go with percentages here because it's a little bit easier, but I would probably spend a solid 20 to 30% of my budget on Carson Steele. And if you're desperate for running back, I'd probably spend a little bit more. But again, the role that he's set to inherit, the touchdown opportunity, we don't know for certain, right? We've seen this happen before where we think we're getting the guy who's going to lead the team, take over that role, but we end up, getting pixie dust instead, right? And who knows, maybe Samaje Perine's the guy, but I would try to get Carson Steele, and maybe you try to hedge your bet a little bit, try to get Samaje Perine if you can. Him, I'd probably be less inclined to spend a ton of fab or a ton of waiver priority. I mean, probably 5 to 10%, maybe, if that. But I feel like he might even be the forgotten guy there. So you might even be able to scoop him up for close to nothing there. But moving on to the next running back on this list, that is New England running back Antonio Gibson, available in 84% of Yahoo leagues. Had 12 opportunities this past week with 103 total yards on the total yards, with 96 of those coming on the ground. So it looks like he's could be more involved in this offense going forward, while also having the baked in upside of being a 3-down back if Ramondre Stevenson were to go down to an injury. Obviously, they play the Jets on Thursday Night Football, so that's another opportunity for Antonio Gibson to be involved as a running back here, and a ball carrier, and be able to potentially score some fantasy points for you if you need him this week. Speaking of the New York Jets running back Braylon Allen, available in 90% of Yahoo leagues, saw 11 opportunities on Sunday, which he converted to 56 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, the 2 touchdowns, they're not going to come every week, but Allen was on the field at times for drives, as it seemed as Breece Hall might have been dealing with something. It might have been a thigh I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I'm not an injury expert by any means, but by somebody who watched the game, seemed like he, on the broadcast they talked about it. He took a hit to the thigh, and was sitting out for some of the game. Was on the stationary bike. Seemed like he was just trying to keep that thing loose. So Braylon Allen was on the field for chunks of certain drives at some point. And I like Braylon Allen a lot. If you listen to me in the Dynasty portion of the podcast earlier in the year, I waxed poetically about Braylon Allen, and that was before the New York Jets were able to draft him. He was one of my favorite backs in the draft, and I didn't understand why the community was so down on him. And he's just shown everything that I thought he was, a big back with explosive speed, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield, which is something that I don't think a lot of people knew. I didn't really know that because, he wasn't asked to do that a ton at Wisconsin. So, he could inherit, again, a 3-down role if anything were to ever happen to Breece Hall. And it just seems like he might even have a role in this offense. I mean, there were times where him and Breece Hall were on the field at the same time together. So, and both his touchdowns came in the red zone. So it seems like he has the trust of the coaching staff, also the trust of Aaron Rodgers. So I think he's got to be rostered in more than 90%, more than 10% of Yahoo leagues. He has to, just given the opportunities that he's been given, as well as, the baked in upside. I'm going to talk about it a lot with these running backs that I bring up, but it's just something as a fantasy football manager, as a fantasy football player, you have to have ingrained in your brain that these running backs that don't look like they have opportunities right now, they don't look like they have a role, they should at least be considered for a roster spot because of a role that can happen, a role that they can come into based on situations that can happen, right? Things that are within the range of outcomes. So just, again, something to consider for you there. Moving on to the next running back on this list, the guy that I spoke about last week, but I'm going to talk about him again, and that's Miami running back Jalen Wright, available in 79% of Yahoo leagues. Again, he did not do much. I think he had four yards on 5 carries on Thursday Night Football, but Mostert is banged up. Jeff Wilson Jr. got banged up in that game on Thursday night as well, and so Wright is next man up, and now obviously with the concussion of Tua, this offense becomes less potent, less explosive, potentially less touchdown opportunity. But Wright could end up as, he's in a situation where Achan's already dealing with injury. Granted, Achan played extremely well on Thursday night, but Jalen Wright, is right now the only other healthy back behind Achan. So, at a minimum, I feel like he's going to get some opportunities. Maybe he didn't get those opportunities on Thursday night. It was a short week, big game. So maybe his role grows more as the season goes on. But also, Achan has dealt with injuries of his own in the past. And so, Jalen Wright could end up in an opportunity here where, he is the only healthy, the only real healthy running back for the Miami Dolphins. Moving on to this next running back here, Cleveland running back Deontay Foreman, available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. Foreman was surprisingly the feature back for the Browns on Sunday, seeing 15 total opportunities to Jerome Ford's 8. Ford was actually still the more productive running back, but if Foreman is getting this kind of work, he should be rostered. And again, we've seen this from Foreman before. He's purely, a ball carrier. He's not really somebody that they look to, that teams look to get involved in the passing game. But if the Browns end up in positive game script, or they end up in games where they're going to be, they're going to be against a team that struggles to stop the run, Deontay Foreman's going to have his opportunities. And would you look at that? They play the Giants on Sunday, so Foreman's going to have some opportunities there in that game, and I would strongly consider adding him to my roster and putting him, potentially in my lineup as an RB3 or a flex option. Again, especially with the injuries that we've seen, he should be rostered in more than 1% of Yahoo leagues. Moving on to the next running back on this list, there's a lot of running backs on this list, which I don't know if is a good thing or a bad thing. But moving on to the next running back on this list, Minnesota running back Ty Chandler, available in 71% of Yahoo leagues. Had no clue Chandler was this widely available, but he saw 10 carries on Sunday, one more than Aaron Jones. Although Jones did see 6 targets while Chandler saw none, but we saw how productive Ty Chandler was at the end of last year, and this is the same coaching staff, so they know what he's capable of. They know what he can do. So I would look to add him to my roster if I'm in one of those 71% of leagues where he is available, because he could get more involved, which again, that would be great. But if Aaron Jones were to get injured, he ends up in a 3-down role here. So, definitely a guy that I would want to add to my team if he's available in my league, because he's a good player from what we saw last year. And he's also somebody who, is one of these guys that can end up in a role. So, moving on to another guy we talked about last week, Baltimore running back Justice Hill, available in 83% of Yahoo leagues. He outsnapped Derrick Henry again in week 2. Didn't see the targets that he saw in week 1, but in competitive, high-scoring games, I think Hill will have a role as the passing down back for the Ravens. So he's good for running backs, or for teams that are desperate for running back help. It's tough, right? Because we didn't see last week coming where the Raiders were going to be keep this game uberly competitive. So it's not like I particularly even liked to play Justice Hill last week, but he ended up on the field a ton because of how that game ended up going between Baltimore and the Raiders. And this week they play Dallas, and that game you figure is going to be a high scoring game. There's going to be possibly a lot of back and forth. And so I feel like Justice Hill will actually have a genuine role this week. So we'll see how that goes. But moving on to the next trio of running backs, because I didn't really know how, my brain hasn't really fully processed this one. But Joe Mixon suffered a high ankle sprain. Well, it looks like a high ankle sprain. They said they're going to evaluate him throughout the week. Head coach D'Amico Ryans said they'll evaluate him throughout the week. But this one kind of seems like a mess, right? Because through the summer, it seems like Cam Akers was the primary running back for the primary backup for Joe Mixon. And then in week 1, it seemed like Dameon Pierce was the primary backup for Joe Mixon. And then Dameon Pierce suffered a hamstring injury, so he was inactive for week 2. So then it seemed like Cam Akers was the primary backup for then Joe Mixon. And he did see 8 opportunities in the game on Sunday night. But Dare Ogunbowale, one of my favorite players ever, not really, but he was also involved in the game, right? So, he saw 4 total opportunities. So it seems like maybe Ogunbowale is not really in the maybe he's not really in the maybe Ogunbowale is not really in the equation here. Maybe it really comes down to Cam Akers versus Dameon Pierce. Um, Cam Akers actually looked halfway decent um, on Sunday night. I mean, he's dealt with the Achilles injuries, which seemed in the past to have like sapped some of his explosiveness, but he looked pretty good in his touches. Seemed like some of that juice, a little bit of the juice was back. But Dameon Pierce obviously had the big rookie year. So if Mixon misses time, do they go to Pierce? This coaching staff, they were down on Pierce last year. He lost he lost the starting running back job to Devin Singletary. So I don't really know exactly how to see this how I see this situation playing out, but I would put sprinkle a little bit everywhere between Pierce and Akers. Ogunbowale, I probably wouldn't spend any fab on because you could probably get him for free. But yeah, that's kind of how I would play this situation. And it's less than ideal, but yeah, I'd probably hedge my bet a little bit if I could. Moving on to the wide receiver position, much less names than we have at the running back position. Running back was crazy this week, but wide receiver, I was surprised to see this one available 59% of Yahoo leagues. That is Cleveland wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. I was in drafts and Jerry Jeudy was sticking around the board super late. And I don't particularly love Jerry Jeudy, but I have a few shares just because it was that late. And through 2 weeks, he scored at least 11 and a half PPR points in each of the last 2 weeks. So again, surprised he's this widely available, but he should be rostered after seeing 8 targets and 6 targets, respectively, each of the last 2 weeks. It seems like he has a pretty strong rapport here with Deshaun Watson as well. So, yeah, I would look to add Jerry Jeudy if I'm in the 59% of Yahoo leagues where he's available and I need some wide receiver help. Moving on to the next wide receiver, Quentin Johnston, available in 93% of Yahoo leagues, led the Chargers in targets this week after coming up second in week 1. This week he scored 2 touchdowns. The second touchdown, he was wide open. I did like the fact that he was able to throttle down in an open area where some young wide receivers would see that much space and just keep running. But he throttled down, presented himself to Justin Herbert, and scored a wide open touchdown. So that was great. But the first touchdown I liked a lot. Got on top of J.C. Horn, who is one of the better corners in the league, and was able to catch a go ball, and he caught it, right? Which last year that was a challenge for Quentin Johnston. So, again, I like Quentin Johnston. It was tough to see him go through last year, being as he was somebody that I did like coming into the season. I did like from a dynasty perspective as well. So I think as the Chargers go on and they find themselves in some higher scoring games with some potentially negative game script, he could see even more production. And so I'm willing to take a shot on a player like this, with the pedigree, first round draft pick, with the athleticism that he has. So yeah, I would be looking to add Quentin Johnston to my roster if I need some wide receiver help. Moving on to the next wide receiver on this list, Indianapolis wide receiver Alec Pierce, available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. That's 2 weeks in a row with a touchdown. And this one felt a bit more repeatable as he went 5 for 6 and 5 for 56 and a touchdown on 7 targets, which again tied for the team lead there with Michael Pittman Jr. Moving on to the next wide receiver on this list, Minnesota wide receiver Jalen Nailor, available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. He had a big day on Sunday, catching 3 of 4 targets for 54 yards and a touchdown after seeing more opportunities with Addison out. But he could see even more opportunities if Jefferson is forced to miss any time and has a matchup against the Houston Texans, which again should be a high-scoring game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans. Moving on to the tight end position, New England tight end Hunter Henry, available in 76% of Yahoo leagues, went 8 for 12 for 109, as he was the clear top option on Sunday for Jacoby Brissett. gets a matchup against the Jets this week, which again should be a good one for him. The Jets, strong against wide receivers, but they can be had against tight ends. So I definitely, 76% of Yahoo leagues in this tight end landscape, he should be rostered in more leagues than that, especially if he's putting up stat lines like this. 18.9 PPR points is no joke. Moving on to the next tight end on this list, Mike Gesicki, Cincinnati tight end Mike Gesicki, available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. It was a big day for Gesicki, 7 for 9, 7 catches, 9 targets, 91 receiving yards. And we talked about him on the matchup show, as this was a good spot for him against the Kansas City Chiefs. But after a game like that, it kind of makes you think if this could continue to be a thing for a tight end who's never really been short on talent. T. Higgins obviously has been missing time with the hamstring injury, and whenever he does return, I think he could eat into this role that Gesicki is kind of carving out for himself. But it's worth riding this one until it fails for us. So again, just given the tight end landscape, you got to take shots like this, and maybe it works out for the long run. Maybe it just works out for a few weeks. But Gesicki available in 95% of Yahoo leagues. If you need help at tight end, which unless you have one of like 6 tight ends, you probably do. So, I would look to add him to my roster. Moving on to the next tight end on this list, Washington tight end Zach Ertz, available in 92% of Yahoo leagues, had caught 4 passes on 4 targets for 62 receiving yards. Ertz has always been a capable tight end. The last few years, it just matters if he's been healthy or not. And so I think as long as he's healthy, he should be considered a tight end option for you. He's a guy that, again, would look to add to my roster. This next guy, Dallas tight end Luke Schoonmaker, available in 97% of Yahoo leagues, caught 6 passes on 6 targets for 43 receiving yards, filling in for the injured Jake Ferguson. Seems that it doesn't matter who's lined up at tight end. Dak Prescott's going to find you. So as long as Ferguson is out, Schoonmaker should be an option at tight end. Just be mindful this one has an expiration date because as soon as Jake Ferguson comes back, I'm pretty sure he's going to take his role. But at least now we know going into the future that Schoonmaker is going to be productive if given these opportunities here. And that is all I have for the waiver show today. Again, if you have been plugged in, we're doing, I do Thursday night picks on my Instagram at the real Jon J _FF. So, I'm giving out picks for Thursday night football, some prop bets for player props. And then on Friday, we do the matchup show. And then, on Friday evening, Saturday morning, I drop, my starts of the week on Instagram as well. I'm going to try to get those onto Twitter. Again, just sorting out the Twitter stuff, or I keep saying Twitter, sorting out the stuff on X. So just give me, again, about a week and I'll get all that sorted out and, get all the content going in, multiple places there. But right now, most of the stuff is on Instagram, the reels and things in regards to the Thursday night football picks, as well as the starts of the week. So, I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Appreciate the support as always, and again, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. And, good luck on waivers. Good luck on waivers. That's all I'm going to say. We'll catch you guys on Friday when we do the matchup show. Have a good one, everybody. I'm out of here. Peace.